The United States has now forward deployed 10 F-35 stealth fighters to counter drug smuggling in the Caribbean. That's adding to what is already one of, if not the largest buildup of U.S. military forces in the region's history. Meanwhile, Venezuelan President Maduro continues to mobilize local militias to defend against what they perceive to be a coming attack from the United States. So let's get into where things stand as tensions continue to rise between the United States and Venezuela. Now, we do have some footage of these F-35 aircraft arriving in Puerto Rico on Saturday, which comes days after U.S. President Donald Trump ordered 10 of the stealth fighters to join the ongoing military buildup in the Caribbean. We're going to get into some details of that buildup, but first, President Trump was asked just yesterday, are you considering carrying out strikes on the Venezuelan homeland? Here's what he had to say.
And just on that, do you think we will start doing strikes on the mainland Venezuela?
Oh, we'll see what happens. Look, Venezuela is sending us their gang members, their drug dealers, and drugs. It's not acceptable.
Now, not a lot to be gained from that, but strangely, yesterday as well, we got this post showing a picture of like Maduro's presidential compound with a lot of details here, kind of maybe suggesting this could be a viable target. The timing here is really weird. This one here came from Marshall Billinglesa. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. He's a former assistant secretary for terrorist financing at the Department of the Treasury. He was the Trump administration's nominee to be undersecretary of state for arms control and international security affairs. I don't think he's actually in the government right now, but he just threw this thing out there like, hey, if you're looking for targets in Venezuela, don't forget about this one. He noted in his post that what you're looking at here has 5 underground levels. They're 40 meters deep. It's a 15,000 square meter facility underneath Presidential Archive Lounge. It has a situation room with video teleconferences, living quarters for the regime, a gym, refrigeration, and kitchen for 4 months and 150 people, oxygen for 25 days, Cuban security, randomly, and connects to the presidential hangar. This is just like tossing out there into the open, here's a good target possibility. Also, that's pretty detailed intelligence to just randomly pop up on X. Makes you wonder if it's like maybe not real, maybe made up. Either way, the timing there is kind of unique. I don't personally think that the F-35s are being sent to Venezuela to carry out strikes inside of Venezuela. I do think that's probably the next step. If we could see continued escalation here, is the United States using some sort of standoff munition, like maybe the Tomahawks that are loaded to the brim on those destroyers off the coast of Venezuela, to go after cartel locations inside of Venezuela. I don't know that the presidential palace going after Maduro is necessarily in the cards right now, but as you'll hear President Trump say later, maybe it is. Not the strike against Maduro, but getting rid of him. Maybe, or maybe not. We'll see. It could happen. Might be a good thing. Who knows? Which seems wild that we're kind of going about possible regime change with that flippant of an attitude. The War Zone did some good reporting here. I'll link their article in the description below, adding some additional context to the deployment of these F-35s. You know, we always think of these as a lethal option, right? This is our most advanced stealth fighter. You think about these being utilized to penetrate Russian airspace, Iranian, North Korean, Chinese airspace without being detected to carry out strikes. Understandably so. That's probably their most likely use case in a future conflict. I mean, we did see these utilized against the Iranian nuclear facilities a couple months ago. The War Zone says the Joint Strike Fighter is an extremely powerful intelligence gathering tool with its highly capable radar and electro-optical systems. Yet its electronic intelligence gathering abilities perhaps its most potent reconnaissance asset. They say in addition, the Bravo model is capable of operating on the Wasp-class amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima that is currently off the coast of Puerto Rico. Launching and recovering from a ship as an option provides commanders with extra flexibility when planning operations. That Bravo model is the one that was just deployed to Puerto Rico, so it matches up with this analysis from the War Zone. Now, they join a pretty significant buildup of U.S. military forces in the Caribbean, turning to Ian Ellis for kind of a roll-up of assets on hand at this point. We've got 4 guided missile destroyers, Tomahawks. You're talking about Tomahawks, that's where they would be coming from. Submarine, the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group with the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, Harriers, helicopters, recon planes, Reaper drones, Cobra gunships, and quite a bit more. And I want to note the inclusion there of a couple vessels from the Coast Guard. You know, traditionally, this type of counter-narcotics operation is viewed as a police-type activity, law enforcement, and it's left to the Coast Guard. And we've talked in recent videos that the Coast Guard just plain does not have the resources to be able to fully shut off the American homeland from the inflow of drugs. It's just not possible. They don't have the people or the equipment to be able to do that. It's not unusual at all to see the Navy kind of supplement the Coast Guard to assist them in some of these operations. What we're seeing here, though, is a bit of a change in roles, where the majority of the resources on station here are U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps, and it looks like the Coast Guard is kind of playing a supplementary role. In fact, we'll come back to that here in a minute, where it looks like a Venezuelan ship was boarded by U.S. Navy personnel, which, again, you generally expect this kind of counter-narcotics type operation to be handled by the Coast Guard. But when you're looking at this large military buildup, there's a bunch of different ways you could interpret it, and it's important to think of how it's being interpreted by Venezuela, right? Kind of in a bit of a standoff right now. They're viewing it that we are getting ready to attack them. In fact, they've started to issue threats to neighboring countries saying, if you let the Americans come through your territory, if you host them or overflight rights, anything like that, we will attack you. That's where we are in this situation. Their defense minister, Pedrino Lopez, said, quote, I say to these governments, talking about Guyana, Trinidad, and Tobago, to whom a draft statement was sent from the United States, that they have played along. If they attack us from their territory, you will also receive a response, and that will be in self-defense. Their Vice President Rodriguez said, quote, a very clear message to the vassal governments of the United States War Department, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the government of Guyana, take it easy, don't dare, don't even think about it. You are lending yourselves to the evil plans of aggression against the people. In response to this, the Trinidad Prime Minister said there were no plans with the United States to invade Venezuela or send troops from Trinidad and Tobago, calling Rodriguez's accusations alarmist. Now, while this is happening, we've seen continued statements from Venezuela that they are mobilizing forces, continuing to move drone units and personnel to the country's borders. And we got this video that was put out a couple days ago with some commentary here from Cornwall Wire, where they say Venezuela's defense minister led mass drills in Caracas with around 4,000 Bolivarian militia under Maduro's People Go to the Barracks plan. So kind of a mobilization plan for the citizenry. He says on September 5th, President Maduro announced the formation of 5,336 communal militia units grouped under a new framework called the Popular Integral Defense Base. The units are meant to strengthen grassroots military organization and bring local communities directly into the country's defense strategy amid growing tensions with the United States, following incidents such as the targeting of Venezuelan vessels and the presence of U.S. warships in the region. So from a purely military perspective, this standing up of these popular defense forces would be an impediment. It'd be a challenge to a degree if we had boots on the ground or we're planning some sort of invasion. When you're talking about an aerial campaign or specifically targeting, cartel activity off the coast of Venezuela, of course, some villagers, some citizens with AK-47s and RPGs in Caracas is not all that much of an impediment. Another way to look at the mobilization of these personnel is for the security and the stability of the Maduro regime. As we'll see in some statements here from President Trump in a minute, there is a consideration, and has been for a long time now, that maybe regime change would be good for the United States. So if Maduro is able to stand up and arm and equip additional military forces that are under his control, at least more under his control than they're not, it does serve the possibility of maybe acting as a bit of his own personal force to prevent an opposition party from coming in and trying to take over. Now, we did see, for the first time since the U.S. Navy has really deployed in mass off the coast of Venezuela, a U.S. Navy ship assisted in the boarding of they boarded a Venezuelan shipping vessel, supposedly in the Venezuelan exclusive economic zone. That's up for debate right now. I don't know if we will get some sort of clarification on that. The issue there is Venezuela says that this happened inside of their territorial waters, which would be a direct violation of Venezuela's sovereignty, whereas the United States says this was international waters. It makes a big difference. On top of that, there's all these international laws of the sea that we are not party to, and I don't believe Venezuela is party to, but it's worth keeping all of this stuff in mind. Now, Venezuela's Foreign Minister Ivan Gall said on Saturday that personnel from a U.S. warship boarded a Venezuelan tuna boat with 9 fishermen while it was sailing in Venezuelan waters. He said, quote, those who gave the order to carry out such provocations are seeking an incident that would justify a military escalation in the Caribbean. He added that the objective is to persist in their failed policy of regime change, adding that the incident was illegal and illegitimate, and warned that Venezuela will defend its sovereignty against any provocation. So again, we're seeing more and more of this from Venezuela, where they're saying the United States is trying to provoke a response. They're trying to do something where, it requires an over-the-top military reaction to one of these incidents. Now, We should note that is all coming from Venezuela. However, the United States has verified at least portions of this story. According to ABC News, a U.S. official with knowledge of the incident confirmed that the Jason Dunham, a destroyer in the region, received information to board the Venezuelan craft to see if it was carrying drugs. The law enforcement detachment aboard the destroyer boarded the Venezuelan craft and carried out a search that turned up no drugs, according to the official. The U.S. official disputed claims from the Venezuelan Foreign Ministry that the search took 8 hours, and they contended the boat was in international waters. This is a little outside my area of expertise. I know on most U.S. Navy ships, there are Coast Guard personnel acting in a law enforcement capacity. So it's possible that those, I don't know how many they would have on the Jason Dunham. It's possible that it was Coast Guard personnel being utilized in that search. Something to keep in mind. Haven't seen the details on that. Now, one of the issues that continues to come up around really everything related to the United States and Venezuela is the legality, not just of the overall operation, which by and large, I think everyone in the United States would consider legal, right? Putting the U.S. Navy out there maybe as a form of blockade to stop drugs from coming to the United States. It's hard to argue that that's not a legal use of the U.S. military. The lethal strike against the boat in international waters is continuing to get some pushback. We played in a recent video how we have different responses right now. The Department of Defense, Department of War, and Republican lawmakers are saying all the information is there. We got it. It was a justified strike. We have Democrat lawmakers saying none of this information has been, we have no idea. They haven't given us anything. And then we've got some legal war scholars kind of in the middle saying even if they knew everybody that was on here, it still looks like it might have violated at least 3 or 4 different laws. So the legal aspect continues to be pushed. President Trump was asked about this just yesterday. Let's go ahead and play that video.
Just one more on Venezuela. The president of Venezuela called the strike on the boat illegal. Are you concerned that Maduro might escalate something?
No, what's illegal are the drugs that were on the boat and the drugs that are being sent into our country and the fact that 300 million people died last year from drugs. That's what's illegal.
Do you think he's not telling the truth when he said it was a fisherman's boat? Do you think that he's
give me a minute. You could see it. You saw the bags of white everything right through the bags. It's nonsense. So we knew it before they even left. We knew it before they even left. We knew exactly where that boat, where it came from, where the drugs came from, and where it was heading. I mean, the problem is nobody's getting on boats anymore, so maybe that's a good problem.
So one of the challenges with President Trump is he says things sometimes, and I don't know. Like, did he mean to say that, or what's going on here? I think that clip is a perfect example. So we've got 300 million people didn't die in the world last year. So I don't even know where. Fortunately, 300 million didn't die in the United States. That would have been rather catastrophic. So, clearly that number is not accurate. He talks about how, the lines that we've heard from the Department of War about we knew what was there, we knew who it was, we knew where they were heading. So that's consistent with recent U.S. government statements. In terms of we could see the white bags, again, from what we have seen publicly, I don't think you can determine that from that footage. I'll play some of that here. Of course, maybe you would expect that they had better intel and maybe different videos that was able to show that. But I don't know. I did not know that people are not getting on boats anymore. That seems like a worldwide problem, if that's a thing. If that's just, that's going to impact U.S. shipping. I've not heard that people are scared to get on boats right now, but either way, which part of that statement are we going with, right? There's a lot there to unpack. Now, President Trump, I mentioned, talked a little bit about this regime change possibility. And this is something that personally is kind of concerning to me because it feels like we're kind of half-assing it is the best way to put it. There's, we heard Representative Brian Mast last week talking about how, hey, it might not be a bad thing because Maduro is a bad dude. And look, it worked out in Syria, which, I don't know that Syria is the best example of effective regime change, but either way, it seems like we're not entirely sure, right? We got like one foot in the water and like maybe regime change would be a good thing. We're not going to push it, but if it happens, we're here for it. That doesn't seem like a good way to have a stable Venezuela in the near or long term. But President Trump was asked about this as well, the possibility of regime change. Let's give that a quick listen.
We'll see what happens. It's not an option or not option. We'll see. He had an election that was wrong. It was almost as corrupt as our election of 2020. You know that? You know what I'm talking about? I wouldn't say theirs was much more corrupt, but it was certainly corrupt. But ours was corrupt also.
All right, so really kind of walking that line of maybe regime change or maybe not. Who knows? We'll see. And I hope there's more planning than that going on behind the scenes, because we're just waiting to see like if the Maduro regime falls and then we'll take some action. Not a recipe for success. But I also want to mention, look, Maduro is an illegitimate president by so many different metrics, right? The presidential election in 2024 was believed to be, quote, one of the most egregious electoral frauds in modern Latin American history. So it was awful what he put together. We had an interview a couple weeks ago with a Venezuelan expert talking about that, some details. It's wild what they did. It is worlds apart from anything that has happened here in the United States. So I know President Trump is saying what happened in Venezuela was not as bad as what happened in the United States in 2020, but just as a little context, the Venezuelan election was widely condemned as neither free nor fair. Maduro barred the opposition person from running a year ahead of the election. She's like, you can't, sorry, too bad. So they had to find somebody else to run. That other person was Edmundo Gonzalez. At the date of the election and leading up to it, all polling showed that he had won, like all exit polls, all data that they have. And then the National Electoral Council under Maduro stepped in and said, hey, great news, Maduro, you did it. No evidence. You guys don't need to see any of that evidence. He won. So all of the available evidence points to the opposition leader winning. And then no evidence, but a government saying, sit down, shut up, and we're going to tell you the answer, said, actually, it's Maduro. Now, this went to the Supreme Court in Venezuela, but nobody really expected anything because the Supreme Court was really just going to rubber stamp whatever Maduro said. And lo and behold, the Supreme Court came out and said, like, great news, guys. We've done it. We dug into it. Maduro is the winner. To nobody's surprise at all. That Supreme Court ruling was rejected by the United States, the European Union, and 10 Latin American countries. So, it's a little bit different. Things played out there just a tad differently than the United States in 2020. I don't know that a comparison there is really the right way to look at it. The Venezuelan election was screwed up in a lot of ways. Maduro is by many counts should not be the leader of Venezuela today. That is worth reiterating. But either way, we're continuing to see the tensions kind of rise between these two countries. We'll see. My gut says that we're still going to see increased military action, probably some sort of strikes against cartel members, maybe even cartel locations inside of Venezuela sometime in the next few days or weeks. I think that is very much still on the table. Hopefully, big picture, we're able to cut down the flow of drugs here in the United States. I think that would be a good thing. I hope we find a good, legal, rational path forward to continue carrying out counter-narcotics operations. There's got to be a way to do that. I'm sure we can do that within the bounds of the law and not put our service members at risk of carrying out what could possibly be illegal orders. That makes me really, really nervous. It's a lot. It's changing, and it's really just right off our southern border in a lot of ways, so it's worth keeping an eye on. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.